There's so much here, and I don't want to miss it. Hey everybody, what's up? It's me, Rosalie. Welcome to the ultimate YouTube channel, all about music, going around the world, learning, growing, psychology, philosophy. I'm so glad you're here. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, and let's get right to it. We have something special to check out today, and that is Ren's brand new song, Money Game Part 3. I reacted to part 1 and 2 just recently, trying to catch up. Those reactions out if you want. I'm repping my Dance in the Light t-shirt that I designed after listening to / being blown away by Ren's song, Hi Ren. So if you want one, grab yourself one in the link below. We're going to dive straight in. Okay, starting over. Ooh, okay. I feel like we are all waiting. We all have this anticipation for part 3. There's this idea of build up, right? Excitement building, some grand finale we're looking for. And he is not disappointing. Straight up coming in with that grand finale vibe on the grand piano. Not starting with the guitar this time, with a grand piano, wearing a suit. It's more formal. It makes me think of businessmen. It makes me think of politicians, right? Thinking money game, grand finale vibe, super classy. And then just the fact that he's such a multi-instrumentalist keeps blowing me away. He's so talented. The money bag over his head, right? I talked about how I interpret some of that in part 1 and 2, mostly in part 1. So check that out. But you guys pointed out very well that the bag over his head also implies a money bag, a reference also possibly to Monopoly. The fact that this is over 9 minutes long, I'm like, wow, he is just putting all of himself and all of his art into his work. Getting dizzy.
Let me tell you a story about a boy named Jimmy. 1 year old and his first words were mine, mine, gimme. 2 years old he was walking, 3 years old walking quickly. 4 years old he was running round the pavements of his city. 5 years old and his daddy told him, listen here son, you gotta learn to be a man. A man, he works for what he wants. 6 years old and he's reading, writing, top of the bunch. And when he's 7, his progression made him student number 1. 8 years old and he's praised for unusual grades. 9, his parents paid for private school to nurture the flame. 10, 11, 12, 13, he ascends and ascends. His daddy tells him, son, money is the means to all ends. 14, solving complex mathematical equations. At 15, IQ 150, still elevating. 16, he develops complex software code that detects weaknesses in cybersecurity protocols. 17, and he sells his vision, keeping the share. Not yet an adult, but he's practically a millionaire. 18, and his daddy tells him, now you're a man. This world don't give a damn about you, so take all that you can. 19, he turns a profit, stocks and shares, invest in product. 20, double down deposits. 21, his income rockets. 22, he learns the truth is just an obstacle to wealth. If you manipulate the data, then the lie will sell itself. 23, a life of luxury, crystal and cocaine. 24, he makes the Forbes list, they're applauding his name. 25, and his daddy tells him, listen here son, while you're sitting in that palace, that don't mean that you won. 26, a business shift, he switches business to arms. He's 27, dealing nuclear and shells in Iran. 28, inside the Senate, money bought him a seat. He's 29, a role of counsel in the president's suite. Now he's 30, his daddy says you're losing the race. You're just a servant to the king, not even in second place. 31, a big maneuver for his daddy's approval, moving imports over borders from the exports out of Cuba. 32, moving grams, growing kilos to tons. He's 33, filling warehouses with powder and guns. 34, turf war with nobody to stop it. Blind eye from the po-po inside of his pocket.
Wow. Wow. Okay, I'm not going to talk about the lyrics yet. I want to take this all in. As you can see, I'm taking notes like crazy because there's so much here and I don't want to miss it. The cinematography of that is very nice. The details from that globe and the liquor bottle that I paused on right now, that old school phone, just taking it, giving us a little bit of the, I wouldn't say quite the Gatsby vibe, though that old phone definitely, gives it a very classic feel. Perhaps this nod to the concept that this is a story as old as time, right? There's no need to showcase things with a modern cell phone, iPhone, right? All the technology we have now. It's very possible to set this in a back in the day setting because it happened then, it happens now. But that's just how I'm interpreting that. I'm not saying that's how it was meant. Just, there's a lot here. I'll keep listening and then we'll talk in the end, so don't go. But I'll say this. There are, from a psychological standpoint, a lot of elements here when it comes to the music video, when it comes to the lyrics, obviously. We always know Ren's lyrics are saturated with thought-provoking truths, but also when it comes to the musical composition, there's a lot here that is, at least for me, evoking various emotions, various thoughts, and I would argue for most of us, even though they're not all the same because we're all subjective, we have our own culture, our own upbringing, but nonetheless, the music will impact us in a certain way. And it is this score that underlines the entire composition. So pay attention to that as you're listening to. Listen to the details of how the notes that are being played, the tempo that is being played, and the transitions, the drama, the crescendo that we're experiencing here. It all matters. It's beautiful, beautifully done.
Grams growing kilos to tons. He's 33, filling warehouses with powder and guns. 34, turf war with nobody to stop it. Blind eye from the po-po inside of his pocket. 35, he gets the call. I'm sorry, son, but it's your father. Had a heart attack, I'm sorry, he's gone. 36, getting pissed up, abusing his product. 37, eyes glazed, disposition demonic. 38, with a prostitute, a moment of passion, heating up a silver spoon and then chasing the dragon. 39, getting reckless and hungry for power. Daddy's words are still driving him to kill and devour. Makes a move against the cartel, but the strategy's flawed. They retaliate and leave him in a hospital ward. A bullet buried in his vertebra and one in his leg. The doctor sighs and says, I don't think you'll be walking again. Fuck.
Wow. Wow.
Let me tell you a story about a boy named Jimmy. He was 40 and he cursed the words, mine, mine, gimme. 41 he wasn't walking, 42 not walking quickly, 43 never running round the pavements of his city, 44 inside a palace with a mountain of gold. But those riches turn to rubble when perspective evolves. Weighing heavy on his conscience is the value of gold. Lamborghini for a life, trading money for souls. Jimmy followed the code inside the land of the free. Put your hand inside the cookie jar, take more than you need. And his example is exaggerated versions of me. And it's a version of him, and it's a version of she, and it's a version of you. There's no escaping the blame. The way we live is parasitic. Fuck the money and fame. Cut the music. This isn't entertainment. This is real life. The way we live is lunacy, community, it declines. Hyperpolarized, always fighting, then we divide. Truth is less important than the money that we designed.
Wow.
Money's an invention. Politics from our invention. They all come from people's ideas. Did I mention? Border's an invention. Law and order fuel the tension. It leads to people killing each other. My solution? Everything is subject to change. We could build utopias if individuals were taught to use their brains. But if we teach kids in schools to always be sheep and put themselves before the herd if there's more money for me, then there's no future I see where the humans survive. We're parasites inside a petri dish with cannibal minds. Mold will grow upon the surface, then consumes till it dies. And our fate could be the same without this story to the wise. "45. Jimmy comes home out of the rain, soaking wet upon a wheelchair, drinking again. He is everything he wants, he is fortune and fame. He's a fortunate fool with an unfortunate fate. With a 45 caliber aimed at his brain. 45 a fitting number cause his age is the same. Here's the words of his father, it's such a damn shame. Then he presses on the trigger of a money game.
Speechless a bit. Wow. I feel like his work really speaks for himself. There's plenty we can talk about here, okay? And I'm gonna go through what stood out to me because that's what you came for. But I think one thing that I'd like to say is that I applaud how he is addressing all these elements of the human plight. And he's doing so without causing further perversion or confusion. There's a fine line between bringing matters to the world without further victimizing people, without further perverting things. And to me, this is really art, what Ren does. And I respect him as an artist because he is, for one, very talented, but he refines his skill. He is not one, he doesn't strike me as one to simply be like, yeah, I'm just good at it, and this is just how it is and what it is. He keeps working to refine, to bring us his best. Not just lightly using his platform to go, well, everybody's listening to me now. I can just say a couple of things and, take it or leave it. He's really bringing us masterpieces, art, doing his best. Like the fact that this was the grand finale of 1 and 2, but still its own work of art in itself. It was awesome to see the same chorus or similar chorus being used in 1 and 2, and so I thought it might be the case in 3. And I like that it was not. I think that was a good decision, as to really drive the point home in a new, fresh way, tying full circle through amazing storytelling what he's been trying to tell us in 1 and 2. When we look at the overall idea behind Money Game, it's obviously very clear that he's calling out the money game. He's calling out corruption. He's calling out politicians and the corruption that happens, the lies that are being fed, the poison that runs through our veins. He is addressing the hypocrisy of us so quickly looking externally and pointing fingers everywhere else, but how we are in need to hold up a mirror and realize we are just as guilty of the same. The footage that we saw both in Money Game 1 and in 2, right? Snippets of history, Hitler addressing colonization and what countries have been doing to each other as long as we know, and how quick we are to point fingers. Here in part 3, I feel like it is just the grand finale of making it very personal, driving the point home. And I think it was wise to do so instead of just speaking generally on the matter, addressing further elements of corruption when it comes to the whole money game, doing so in a very personal way, telling us a story that we all know. We know this is happening. This is not a far-fetched story, but it's driven so personal that you can't but listen. You have no choice but to listen and pay attention. The whole composition, as I mentioned earlier, starting with the grand piano, fitting to that idea of a grand finale, to me, suits, formal, making me think of that Wolf on Wall Street, the businessmen, the politicians, that clean look. It looks clean on the outside. Those in high places, they look like they have it all together. And I would dare say this is not just a matter of politicians and businessmen. This goes for the music industry, the movie industry. This goes for day-to-day people on social media. We present ourselves suited up and on our best foot forward. We have the pictures on Instagram that are Pinterest worthy. We have displays of beautiful birthday parties and outfits and women looking great and men looking sharp. And we will put our best foot forward. Even those who post the more behind the scenes materials, those who are willing to say, hey, look, I got my messy hair and everything's a mess. I want you to see the real me and not just some filtered version. Even those people sometimes use that as part of their identity as well. They want to now be known for their authenticity. So they just lay it all out there. And then that becomes the new identity and that becomes the new filter. It almost becomes the same thing in Purple, where you have one fully polished picture where everything seems perfect, and we know behind closed doors that's not the case. And then you have those who show us the mess, but that has become their identity. That's how they're getting their views. That has become their audience, and people love that. And now they're getting the same fix. They're getting the likes and the views and the attention and the money, because views is money nowadays. That's the new currency in a lot of ways. And that becomes their new identity. So this idea of a suit being polished and put together, suited up and all looking all spiffy, to me also symbolizes how we are so easily fooled by what appears to be put together when there's a lot of brokenness behind it. And that's very applicable when it comes to social media. Then to see everyone with the money bags over their head, right, fitting to the idea of Monopoly, the money bag, and now Ren taking the noose off of his neck and looking in the mirror. To me, that implies, for when it's cool because it's the grand finale, to now see him reveal himself, though we all knew it was him. But now almost getting really personal and raw. Now it's no longer I'm going to hide, but I'm going to face myself. I'm going to face the truth. Perhaps encouraging us to do the same. Dare to take the mask off. Dare to look behind the money bag. Dare to loosen that noose. So there's an element of hope, I feel, to take off what's blinding us, but at the same time also a brutal reality to say you're going to have to look into the mirror. And that works with 1 and 2 also, Money Game 1 and 2, because it's this idea of, hey, we are no better. We all need to look inside. And then there being 2 of them, right? When the other person comes in and takes over on the piano. Really awesome how the 2 of them worked on this music video. His vocalization in the beginning, a beautiful red thread to what he was doing in 1 and 2. Old school voice that I talked about before and other reactions that I just love, that takes us back. The whole setting had a little bit of this, like I said earlier, a little bit of the Gatsby or the Wolf of Wall Street vibe. It was classy, it was tasteful, and it was fitting because it's a tale as old as time. That beautiful, from a musical composition standpoint, a lot of crescendo, a lot of dramatic elements in the piano playing, grand piano, right? There's a lot of that, this beautiful arrangement, the notes evoking a lot of intensity emotionally within me. Perhaps you felt differently, so comment below and tell me how it affected you. But then slowing down, the way he was moving his fingers almost playfully, right? This artistic, performance. I love the setting. Also, to me, a red thread with where he's been recording some of his other music videos. These cold metal walls, this industrial vibe, just classy. And then we talk about the lyrics, and we see how he's talking about this little boy named Jimmy learning to be all about mine, and gimme, 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 right? So throughout the whole performance, the whole song, awesome rhyme. This picture that was being painted, phenomenal storytelling to tell us about a child that went from crawling to walking to running. And of course, that is fitting because that's what children should technically do in their development. But that also beautifully tied back in towards the end when he addressed this man in a wheelchair who no longer could, who would never would walk and run again. Full thread, full circle coming back around. But it addresses this child development that we are to expect, but also it's on a psychological level very fitting to how our minds work when we are driven by something. We go from walking to running to chasing after things. And the whole idea of this performance, along with several others, this whole masterpiece, was this idea of being so driven by that money game to the point of death, to the point of complete and utter destruction of others and ourselves, right? This message that this father is passing on to his child, who he himself may have received that from his father, and that from and in turn that man from his father, from generation to generation, perhaps this idea being passed down of you have to be number one. The way that Ren told us about this progression, this child going from walking to running, by doing so counting to the numbers, also fitting because it is a numbers game. Money games are numbers games, right? When we play Monopoly, it's all about the numbers. Show me the money, right? It's all a numbers game. Regardless if we use actual money, coins and bills as a currency, regardless if we use shells as was done back in the day, regardless of what we use, what we deem valuable to exchange, to pay for things, it's a numbers game. So running us through those numbers was awesome. Talking about money being the means to an end and this idea of it going faster and faster, right? It's not even about the money anymore. It's this means to an end. So we're told, hey, it's not about the money. It's just about the goal. But ironically, we never reach that goal. Ironically, it's never enough, right? Ironically, even though money is supposed to be a means to an end, it never ends. It really gave me this, as I mentioned already a couple of times, Wolf on Wall Street vibe. The wordplay talking about making it, right? This young man growing up to be a young adult, basically a millionaire, but not even an adult yet. Also very relevant to our day and age because of a lot of young people are getting rich off of their viral videos and off of their great social media platform, and they're very young. They're not even adults yet, and they're already millionaires. This storytelling that paints this picture of this young man who's now on Forbes magazine, who's being written about, who's making it. He's playing with the big dogs. But now that the world is shifting, in order to make more money faster, the businesses he's engaging with are changing, and now he is dealing and selling cocaine. And the wordplay of in arms and Iran, this idea really telling us, really showing us how it all is connected. It's really not just a lot of times, not always, there are different situations, but a lot of times when it comes to that crazy money and getting it fast and being so driven, a lot of times it goes beyond just someone working 9 to 5 making good money. And those who are very rich, they get, if not careful, get consumed by that world, and they want more of it, right? That ingrained gimme, gimme, gimme mindset translates now to looking for opportunities to make even more, right? Now in the drug industry, getting involved in the cartel and in the mafia. And it gets really messy really fast, but it's never enough. And what's interesting to me, psychologically, even throughout the storytelling of painting this picture of this child becoming a young man, becoming an adult, chasing after this, playing this game, it sheds light on the approval that this boy was looking for. He had learned from his father that that's what you need to do to be a man. His entire identity His entire existence, the meaning of his existence, was tied to impressing his father and gaining his father's approval. And as I said earlier, maybe his father had learned the same from his father in turn. Word plays like turning a blind eye to the popo and having them in his pocket, right? This nod to, not even a nod, a very clear reference to the corruption that it comes when it comes to politics, right? We're talking about Iran and arms when it comes to the world of substance abuse, and when it comes to even the justice system, police officers being dirty and being paid off, people having them in their pocket because they're being paid off. And then again, constantly going through those numbers with us. 35, his father dies and things go south, right? Now this voice that has been in his head is no longer present, but the voice, now this person whom he's been trying to impress all his life, whose approval he's been craving, is dead. And when someone dies in our life, especially a person that has carried great weight to our identity, when they pass away, it really brings up a lot of suffering. Not only does it trigger our own death anxieties because it reminds us of our own mortality, but it brings up a lot of that unfinished business if there was no closure, if there was no forgiveness. And if this person passed away and their voice, the messages that they instilled in us, especially a parent, if those are still present in our lives, there's a whole lot of healing that should happen to reconcile the death of that person, but how their voice and our minds keep living on. There's a whole lot of we could talk even on that topic alone for much longer because there's a whole lot of pain and a whole lot of internal work that needs to be done. But this man is so driven, he's already so deep into this world that once his father passes, he is not now processing what that means, the death of his dad, that key person that was so closely tied to his entire identity, to his entire life choice. But instead, now at 35, he just spirals. And now what he was selling and what he thought he was mastering and using is now using him. What he thought he had control over is now controlling him. He's not no longer selling drugs, becoming rich off of them. He's taking them himself and getting reckless, right? It's that story as old as time again, right? Where people think they are in control. That goes for many things. Our emotions are a tool. They are messengers that tell us something's wrong. But it's one thing to be aware of our emotions, to work through them, to allow them to come and then go, to use them as tools. It's another thing to be controlled by them. And that goes for everything in life, right? There's many things that in measure might be beneficial or nice, right? Some people enjoy a glass of wine. There's different things that we enjoy in measure, but once they control us, it just wreaks havoc and we cause a lot of suffering in each other's lives. And that goes for that money game too. If we're not careful and when we're not careful, those things become our idol, our God, and we start worshiping them. Sometimes unknowingly, they start controlling us. So he becomes reckless. He ends up in the hospital and loses his ability to walk. Can't walk anymore, is bound in the wheelchair. That also so fitting, that red thread to the music videos for Hi Ren and Sick Boy, where Ren was in the wheelchair. And here I find it symbolic because obviously the storytelling is painting a very realistic picture of a man who cannot walk anymore, literally. In Hi Ren, Ren was in that wheelchair not because he can't walk anymore, but to me it was a nod to his physical ailments and Ren's health struggles in the past, but also to being crippled in our minds. The whole idea in Hi Ren of those existential fears that I address and that battle between light and dark and the various voices in our mind, truth and lies, etc. A lot of times they end up leaving us crippled. Here, though that's a nod to me, to those songs, here it's fitting, not only because this man is literally crippled now through literally disabled through that accident and getting in the wrong hands and being injured. It's also, to me, symbolic to being crippled by that money game. You're so captured, so controlled by this game. You no longer can walk and run. And isn't that a shame? Because that's what that little Jimmy boy was supposed to do. He was supposed to run freely, play freely, walk. And we were given that opportunity. And I think it's such a gift to be able to live in this world and to experience life, to grow through different seasons, physically, literally, emotionally, psychologically speaking. But if healing is not occurring, we end up running, but not freely. We end up running from something or towards something, and we miss the whole point. And then again, that numbers game continues. Now he's 40 and he's cursing that my mentality, never able to run again, realizing that what did he say, the Lamborghini or the Bugatti, right? What is that? It reminds me of this verse that says, what is it? What is the verse that basically says, what's the point if you gain the whole world but lose your soul, you forfeit your soul? And the orchestra coming in beautifully. Also, the musical composition powerfully ties into that grand piano in the beginning, now the stringed instruments. Psychologically, that evokes a lot of drama in my mind. It takes me deeper into the emotion. It slows things down. If this would have been a composition full of drums and full of, I don't know, e-guitars and such, it would have come across differently. To me personally, there would have been more elements of excitement and anger, subjectively speaking. Here, the strings add to the grief. The piano setting the tone in the beginning, anticipation, excitement. The strings here making me think of tears, making me think of suffering. It makes me think of the veins and the muscles that hold our bodies together. It makes me think of life, and it slows things down for us to be able to really hone in on the emotion, the suffering, the pain. And Ren stops the music and starts speaking. That too, awesome and beautiful, because I love when he did that at the end of High Ren. It just takes you in. And he speaks of that decline, those words, the alliterations, decline, divide, and then those rhyme schemes when he speaks of inventions and did I mention, right? Great wordplay, just phenomenal wordplay. But he's basically addressing us, realizing, hey, this is not just that man or this woman. This is us. It's all a version of us. In some shape or form, this applies to us. Because it's easy to think, wow, this just applies to the rich, the politicians, and the wolves on Wall Street, right? But quite frankly, it applies to anyone. Even those who struggle with poverty are part of that money game. They're working hard to be able to come up with the money, to be able to keep working, right? They're working to come up with money for gas so they can drive back to that job to make more money for gas. And many who are just your average citizens can find themselves somewhere on that spectrum, regardless if it's begging for money, if it's working for the money, if it's hoarding the money, if it's investing the money. We're all trying because we have been told that's what makes the world go round. And quite frankly, that's the truth. It is a tool. And I said this before that, it's an illusion, but it's a tool. And someone in our live chat commented, well, you said it's a tool, but now you're saying it's illusion. What is it? And I jokingly replied, and I said, well, it's a tool of illusion. But in all honesty, I think it can be both, right? Illusions serve us as tools at times. And you know how they say ignorance is bliss. Sometimes things that may not even be what we think they are, they may be illusions, if you will. They still serve us just as much as the idea of time is technically an illusion. There's no such thing as the past and the future. Even if we could time travel, it would be our present yet again. But it's still a tool. We utilize it to measure things. We utilize it to communicate. Meet me at 2:00, right? I have 30 minutes. So even illusions can be tools, I guess. But I think in this spoken word, in this monologue in the end, Ren beautifully ties everything together and reminds us this is not just the version of that man or this woman. This is you. This is me. We all are somewhere on that spectrum. We're all somewhere on that monopoly board. Even if it's in jail, even if it's hopping around trying to find a property, or those who are cashing in hard because they're having people land on theirs. And he speaks of our inventions, and he speaks of how it's all man-made, the money, the inventions, and then taking it full circle to how this may end, or how this ends specifically for Jimmy. The way he folds his jacket nicely, also very symbolic in my opinion, taking this nice suit, this facade, if you will, this jacket that covers up what's really going on, nicely folding it, laying it down, still presenting himself in a certain way, still coming across as presentable, as in control, perhaps. Maybe in a way also this idea of surrender, laying it down, then speaks of what is the solution. And him picking up the gun and slowly loading the ammunition, the bullets, made me think of him setting himself on fire, pouring gasoline over himself in Money Game Part 1. So a great tie there. That's self-destruction. And I know you informed me that in Money Game 1, him lighting himself on fire was also a nod to what has been done in history before. Was it an Asian monk, or who was it again? A few of you pointed out to me that it was, I guess, Win Bruce, a 50-year-old climate activist and Buddhist, set himself on fire in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, prompting a national conversation. And there's been others too that have done so. Here, self-destruction nonetheless. But here, Ren picking up the gun, Ren as Jimmy, now sitting in the wheelchair. And at 45, again, that powerful numbers game, but also the parallels, as he even points out in his lyrics, between age 45 and the gun, and now pulling that trigger on the money game. And ending his life, but not ending the money game, even though he's pulling the trigger on the money game. And it's interesting because he's pulling the trigger on himself, ending his life, pulling the trigger on the money game. But where his life is ending, the money game is being triggered, not ending. It's being triggered, perhaps starting all over again, teaching kids in that our cannibal minds. To me, that's a nod to Animal Flow, this idea of how we are the ones who devour, right? It's all just the same in purple. If the animals all took over, they'd end up slaughtering each other too. It's this cycle of our animalistic minds that are cannibal minds, how we consume one another, right? You eat your own when you're a cannibal. You're consuming one another, devouring. And speaking of wording things like story to the wise, right? This is truly a story, a phenomenally written story. Word to the wise. I think that's also interestingly worded because we only are wise if we listen to the story. And the gist of it towards the end to me is also this concept of teaching our kids differently, because that's how it all started. Jimmy being told one thing by his father and it consuming his entire identity, driving him to the point of complete destruction of others and himself. And I think Ren is addressing some very important and heavy things here that are very valid. What is the solution, right? I mean, because it's a complicated conversation. The solution to me is not just let's just all share it. Let's just all, have a cap on how much we can accomplish. Because who decides that, right? Is that really the solution, to have a certain group of people, a type of government, now tell you what you can and can't accomplish, right? Is that the answer, to cut off people at a certain limit? But how do we avoid those huge gaps between the poor and the rich? How can we encourage people, individuals, out of the generosity of their heart to give to those in need, not to be greedy and not to destroy? And unfortunately, that is not something that changes, because most of the corruption flows through all levels of society. That's why I keep saying choose life in what we say, what we watch, how we speak. When we see someone in need, doing what is right. And even that's a dance, right? Sometimes we may give something to someone we deem in need and they're just using it. They're just playing games too. They're playing that money game as well. And then you may have those situations where people live off of the hard work of others and they don't feel any guilt or remorse because, why work for it if I can get it for free? They're too playing the money game. Every one of us is guilty somehow. And I think Ren, though he doesn't have all the answers, none of us truly do, because it is an individual decision to do what is right. He still beautifully reminds us to look at what we are doing for the next generation. What are we teaching our children? What is the message that we're passing on to them? We get to decide what are we going to story ourselves and what are we going to speak into the lives of others around us. It's a phenomenal masterpiece. I mean, an absolute beautiful arrangement. What did you think? Let me know in the comments below. See you on the next ride. Keep choosing life. You got this one life. Make it count. I'll see you on the next ride. Ayo! Ayo!